Discover the Women in Tech Trailblazers podcast, hosted by Tiffany Benitez. Here, the complexities of being a woman in the tech industry are unraveled through discussions on key issues, personal growth, and how to succeed despite systematic challenges. It's a source of empowerment and inspiration for all women at all stages of their tech careers. Welcome to Women in Tech Trailblazers. I am so excited to be back here with each and every one of you today. Also super excited to introduce our guest to you. And the topic that we are going to share and talk through today is one that I've been hearing over and over again over the past, several months, year, I would say. And it's actually an interesting topic because I don't know that earlier in my career I'd ever heard or knew this was possible. And so as I introduce our guest and we talk about what this topic is, which just FYI, the topic is crafting your next IT role. And why that's so foreign and why we don't actually know that we have the power to craft what's next for ourselves. Again, it's just not something we're taught. We don't learn that in college. I don't know how much of that is even shared with us in our career. And so I'm super passionate about this and super excited to get to talk about this with each and every one of you today. So with no further ado, I want to introduce our incredible guest. Jossie Haines is a leadership coach and a former VP of engineering. She spent 25 years at Apple, Tile, Zynga, and American Express, including the Emmy-winning Siri on Apple TV team and building products used by over 100 million people. No pressure, 100 million people. She started her coaching practice with a specific mission: keeping women in tech. That's the goal. Keeping women in tech and bringing more women in. And over 50% of women leave the industry by age 35, often not because they want to, but let's be real, because of the biases they face. And today she helps engineering leaders stop drowning in execution and really start building the strategic influence that gets them recognized, because she's seen too many brilliant leaders doing VP level work without getting the recognition. How many people can relate? And not only the recognition, but what about the compensation that comes with it and promotion that they for sure deserve. She remains deeply committed to championing women in tech because she knows what it's like to question whether or not you belong. So welcome to the show, Jossie.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Me too. Okay, so our podcast. It's no surprise to any of you that have been listening in for a while, but if we have new listeners, it's really about talking about the things we never talk about. I think we throw around this word authenticity a lot. I think it's become a buzzword. And the reality is what it means to each and every one of us is a little bit different. And so we always love to kick off the podcast and really start with saying, Jossie, what does authenticity mean to you?
So I think authenticity is complicated for women in tech. On the one hand, it means showing up, being able to be your full self, being able to be honest about what you know and what you don't know. And, some of the best leaders I've worked with can say, I'm figuring this out too, while they don't know that. But there's a double bind. When women show up with our full stories, we get judged for it, often in ways that men don't. If you're not fully confident, it can be she doesn't have enough executive presence, right? If you share doubts, she's not ready to be at that leadership table. And so it can actually feel really isolating and alone to be showing up as your full self. And so I feel like I have the privilege of being able to share very openly now because I have gotten to that VP level. I've done it. And so I can come back and say hey, my story was not perfect. It was not this just lovely line up and to the right. But I know that I can do that from a place of privilege. And hey, I still get judged sometimes for the things I show up. But I've also just learned I'm going to do it anyways. And if I piss somebody off in the process, well, that's on them, not on me. But especially for people that are earlier in their careers, I don't want them to feel that to be authentic means you have to say everything publicly in every single space, especially if it doesn't feel safe. So maybe it means you have a trusted circle of people you can be authentic with. And maybe right now that is one person, and that's okay. And so I say, think about authenticity as a spectrum, and you get to choose how much you want to share and when.
I love that. I don't know that that's like a perspective that I've heard before. And that's why I love starting off with this. It's like the reality is, I mean, we hear like bring your whole self and, just be you. And we hear a lot of those things, but I love the like what you share, like the aspect that you brought from that perspective. It's huge. And that you don't have to share every single piece, right? And that that's totally okay. But I think you're right. Like how we speak up, how we share, what we share essentially becomes the brand that we build for ourselves, right?
Mhm.
And so are you building a brand that's authentic to what you want to stand for? And I think that's a question to also like challenge ourselves with of like your brand is your brand. So if
Right.
you want it to be something different or you want people to know something different about you, I think what you share, the visibility you get around that, how you show up, right? And visibility isn't always like the annoying see me, like I did all these things, right? I think it's definitely more organic in that. But yeah, I really love that perspective. Okay, we are women in tech. Okay, so we are sitting here, women in tech. Our audience typically is like we've got a lot of really incredible like teenagers and girls in tech that listen in. We've got women in tech, we've got allies, and then we've got women and men that just like what we're doing, and maybe at some point do have a desire to come into tech. And the reason I say like pointing out who our audience and that we are women in tech, I think there are very real things that we deal with as women, especially in this industry. So I'm just curious to know, have you like on your career journey, and we're going to dig in a little bit more into your career journey in just a second, but in your career journey, have you encountered any type of bias? And like, if so, like, how did you really navigate that?
I'd honestly be shocked if you had somebody come up on the show and ask them that question and they said, no, I've never experienced any bias in my life. I want to meet that person, honestly. Yes, more times than I can like count, right? And I mean, there's stories. Like I think one of the most top of mind ones that I remember to this day is I was leading a team. I was at American Express. It was me, a bunch of men. I don't think there was any other women in that room. And I was defending my team. I don't remember what we were talking about, but I was defending my team. And literally one of the men turns to me and says, well, aren't you being feisty today? And I'm like, what? And it was just one of these like mic drop moments where I was like, is nobody going to say anything? And the conversation just continued as if he hadn't said anything. And I wasn't in a place in my career at that time where I felt like I could. So I just kind of stopped and was like in shock for a second. And then just said something like, hey, I'm trying to defend my team, and kept going. But then afterwards I took a step back and was like, okay, I need to speak up about this. And so I did. I spoke to my manager, I spoke to the person. And again, I don't think there was like malintent on his part to call me feisty, but I was like, that is not okay. That is not okay to say to a woman in a professional setting. You would never call a guy feisty in the middle of a meeting.
Yeah. I feel like there's like this image they have of like how women are supposed to act. And then the moment that someone stands up for what's right or voices their opinion, there's all of the other lovely labels that come along with it. And you're right. Like we haven't had a single guest that has said no. And the reason I'm super passionate about asking that question is that a lot of us feel like we're alone. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe this just happened to me, or like maybe let's be real. It often even becomes maybe it's something that I did, like, and you even stop and maybe ask yourself for 1 second in the silence, was I being feisty? You know what I mean? Like the labels
Yeah.
get put there and then you like, you start questioning your own self. Like all I was doing was standing up for my team, but you know what I mean? It takes a while to process. And I think our allies ask us a lot, how do we help? Like, how do we become part of the solution? And this example is a great one. And it's like, when you hear those things, right? Or when you say them, and there's totally like professional way to do that, right? You don't have to like
Mm-hmm.
rudely address them. But I do think standing up and saying something when things like that happen, especially when you see the person, man or woman, but definitely like are women that are sitting there paused. Like, she's clearly paused for a reason. That's so weird to even say, you know? And so I think just addressing it and helping be part of the solution and redirecting the conversation into going back to what you were trying to do for your team is how you can help as allies.
Talking about that, right? I think one of the things that we can do, right, as women, like, let's say you go to a recurring meeting and you notice that you're spoken over often, or that you notice that your idea gets ignored and then a guy brings up the same idea 5 minutes later. Reach out to the people who you know are in that meeting with you, who you see as allies, and ask them, right? Because allies do have good intentions, but sometimes they don't think about it in the moment. And so if you know that that's a pattern that you've seen, like, what's in our control? In our control is to ask for the support, right? And there's nothing wrong with asking for that support. And you were saying, like, so often we get into our heads about it. And absolutely, it's like, it's the little microaggressions, right? I call them like drops, like little water drops in a bucket. And eventually, like, our bucket overflows. And that's where we start doubting, like, do we even belong in this industry?
Yeah, it's so true. And your career journey is really cool. I know I talked about all the amazing places that you worked when I kind of did your bio and your intro, but did you take, because we often find that a lot of women end up in technology. And so, first of all, like 96% of us end up in jobs that have nothing to do with our degrees. There's that. But I'd like to know, did you, like, from the time you were a little girl, want to be in engineering? And, like, what was your path? And that's okay. We have some women that have traditional, we have some that stumbled their way in. But I think it's helpful for context for the rest of our conversation. Just tell us a little bit about your journey and kind of how that's gone.
So I always loved playing with computers. I got my first computer when I was 5 years old, and I loved it. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, though. So when I went to Princeton, like, my degree was in chemistry. My junior year, I had this realization that I had no interest in going to med school. Like, I did not want to continue going and studying. And so I got a job as a technical consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers. And they sent me to a 3-month boot camp to learn how to code. And I fell in love and was soon teaching my colleagues on how to code. And so this was 1999. They sent me out here to California, to Silicon Valley, to learn a technology that doesn't exist anymore called Broad Vision. And, like, that week changed my life, because it was like, I just fell in love with, like, the technology, the culture out here of building things. Like, this is really when tech was like, oh, we're going to make the world a better place. And, like, as a 20-year-old out here, I was like, that sounds amazing. And so I was like, I want to transfer to California. And PwC was like, no, not going to happen. And so I said, I'll figure it out. And so I flew out here, interviewed at a bunch of little tiny .com startups, and landed a job as a web engineer in this, like, 10-person startup. So in February of 2000, I moved out here knowing literally one other person in the Bay Area.
I love that. Okay, first of all, what I love about your story is that I heard you say you've always liked computers, right? But your parents wanted you to be a doctor. So maybe, and also our generation, the exposure to coding, we didn't really necessarily get that mostly, unless you went to some special tech program. Like, our regular school curriculums didn't provide that. So they get more computer science now. But so I heard you say parents wanted you to be a doctor. So it's not like you saw them be engineers, right? And you knew you liked computers, but it was this boot camp that you fell in love. And why I'm calling out that particular sequence is that, in a way, you kind of still did have to stumble your way in. Some of it's
Yep.
generational because we just weren't as far along. And it's great when we have people that we see that are either parents or family. Great. Then I see engineers or I see technology roles, and I know that I could go into that. We've got to give more exposure to our next generations and our generations coming into the workforce of, like, what's actually out there. So you got to do an engineering boot camp, but what if you wouldn't have liked engineering? Then you said, okay, well, I'm not going to go into tech then, right? Like, how do we really start getting this population of folks in to some type of here's foundationally what's offered in technology, and that's a broad spectrum, but here foundationally, test it out, see which one you semi-like, right? And then go from there, because the reality is, like, not everybody's going to go back and get a hold of their degree. Some people have degrees, master's degree, not everyone's going to do that. And then how do you really, I think the answer is to like go out and get some like base level, entry level tech certifications, because it gives you like entry level knowledge in multiple areas so you could decide. But I thought that was like super important to call out, because it wasn't like you were a little girl that saw engineering parents and then you ended up in that path. And I think that's very important for us to call out person after person, is that it doesn't have to be exactly how your parents see it. It might not even turn out exactly how you originally planned. And then my biggest heart is letting everyone know that you can be anything you want to be and be it in tech. Like it's just such a broad spectrum, and you could truly do anything. So thank you for sharing your career journey. Okay. All of this has been prep up to the big part that I want to tackle, which is the topic, crafting the IT role, your next IT role. Okay. Now, when you and I talked, so I always talk to every guest before. I don't just like randomly host people. I need to make sure like their mission and who they are really aligns with what we're after here. And so in talking to you, and you came up with this like crafting IT role, and it like went off like a light in my head, because again, I've been having so many conversations with women, particularly into industry, that the role they're in, they created. But it's a semi-foreign concept. Like, I don't know that everyone's sitting out there thinking like, I have the ability to do that. So talk to me about this concept of crafting your next role, and what exactly does that mean? Before we jump back in, a quick thank you to Women in Technology of Northwest Arkansas for being part of this journey. We cannot thank them enough. They continue to create space for women to grow, connect, and lead in tech. Let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, so it basically means getting to design what you want to do next in your career. And I actually think it is such an amazing time to be doing this too. And I'll get more into the details, but I like from a time perspective, with just how much AI is changing things, and it is bringing different perspectives and different ways of building things. You can design a role if you see like something that isn't being done that will help move the needle at your company. And so, as I said, at the basic level, it is creating a role that doesn't currently exist. And every time I have done that, it is because there has been a business impact and a business need that I saw. And I said, this is how I can help solve this problem for you. So when I was at Tile, my goal was really to be on the executive table in some way, shape, or form. And first, when I had joined Tile, I actually was leading a lot of the DEI efforts on top of being an engineering leader. And so I unofficially had the title of like head of DEI, and I got to show up to executive team meetings, but it wasn't like an official position. And so I was like, no, I really want that seat at the table. And speaking to the fact that this isn't something people know that you can do, like the entire reason that I even thought about doing this was I was working with an executive coach at the time, and she's like, we can work on crafting you a role. And it's actually, this experience right here is one of the main reasons why I went into coaching too, is because I wanted to be able to show other people that you don't just have to take kind of like the role that is being given to you. And so at the time, this was the middle of COVID, we were about to grow significantly on the engineering side. There were some very large technical initiatives that needed a lot of architecture support. And I had worked with my boss, not just at Tile. We had worked together at Zynga, where he had been my manager, and we'd been peers back at NetApp. So we had a long working relationship. And while we're both great at both the technical and leadership side. We complement each other very well when he focuses and deep dives on the technical side, and I focus on the leadership, organizational structure, processes, and things like that. And so I really saw an opportunity for him to get promoted to CTO, myself to VP of engineering. He could focus on driving like the two main technical architecture projects, and then I could help with scaling the team. And what I want to also talk about is like, this wasn't like I sent the proposal in and it magically overnight like happened. There was like 3 to 4 months of going back and forth, discussing like how to really structure it. But the linchpin really was when I presented it to the CEO, I was not saying, hey, I want to do this because I want to be VP of engineering. I presented this as, if you want to hit your business goals that I know you want to hit, this is how we actually structure the team to hit the goals that you desire. And by doing that, that is what set it in motion to be like, okay, then let's figure out all the little details that need to be ironed out. But that was like the really key component of it. And so then we moved into the new structure. I doubled the engineering team size in 3.5 months, and we completely reorganized how the teams were structured to actually for the scale of the company now.
Hey, I heard a couple of key things. First of all, that's incredible. But I heard a couple things. So number one, you have to be able to identify that there's a need. So I'm talking to my tech friends now, okay? What we don't always do a really good job at is understanding the business, like the strategy, the outcomes, the roadmap. So in order to truly, even on the tech side, because remember, we are here to enable business, okay? Technology. So you have to understand proactively without them telling you even, like, what are the needs? What are the problems, right? Because it's then when you understand that, then you can say, here's where there's a gap, right? To just say like, this isn't, hey, I just want to be the VP of X. And so here's how I think it should happen. You need to tie that back to true outcomes and business value, which means you're going to have to know your business. And again, traditionally in IT, we do our roles really well, but that's all we know. And we really need to start moving towards this truly understanding our business and what the outcomes that we're helping them deliver are. And this, I think, actually in this AI era, right, and the more we continuously move this direction, this is going to become more and more important because I don't know how many of you have heard of role fluidity, but the days are numbered of you being X, and these 5 things are your job description. As AI takes on more and more of those manual tasks, right, and leaves it open for humans on the human pieces that we need to be driving around creativity and collaboration and all of that, your role may not look like these 5 things, and it may not be laid out like that. So what we need to prepare ourselves as technologists to be able to do in the future state is to really be able to relate with our business and really be able to think about it on a scrum team. Like everybody does whatever they have to do. You might be the engineer, you might be UX UI, but we all work together and complete whatever has to for it to be delivered. So you're going to have to start thinking about this AI era and how we work more in those terms if you're going to want to be successful. Because again, the days of you're just the engineer and these 5 things are your job are coming, they're dwindling down. But I loved how you really talked about the business need, because that is something right now we struggle in tech to really figure out and understand. And I guess if your goal, anyone's goal, is to continue to move up the ladder, we're going to have to get better and better at that. So if you want to craft your next role, what did she say? You need to understand there's a business need or a gap, and here's the solution. Because you can take problems to leadership all day long, but I can just tell you as a leader, if you bring me the problem, I'm going to ask you then what's the solution and how you can be part of driving that, right? So it's also building your brand and visibility around you saying, there is a problem and here's how I propose we solve it and how I can help.
And tied to that, women tend to be really great at seeing the problems, right? They see like, this is a challenge, right? They have this great ability to do that. And yet what ends up happening is they get pigeonholed as the problem person, not the solution person. And they're like, but isn't that my job? Isn't my job to come and share like what's going on? And it's like, yes, and like your boss is like insanely busy. If you just keep showing up with problems, you're actually making their jobs harder. And so the more that you can tie every problem with a solution, and here's where sometimes I see people getting stuck with that is when they show up with the solution, they think, oh, I need to have the perfect, fully 100% crafted solution with a bow on top, right? And I'm like, no, the solution doesn't have to be like fully fleshed out. Like there can be things that you most likely need to dig into, but just showing up with like, here is the possibility of how we can solve this that I'm happy to dive into and explore. Like that is the skill set to be uncovering.
Yeah, and I know you talked to us a little bit about an example of how this exactly took place in your career. Do you like how do you see that continuously propelling? And have you seen that with those around you too? And I mean, again, I know over the last like probably year, I have probably 3 women that I know have literally crafted their role. But okay, we've kind of told them how, where you need to start, but what do some of those outcomes? So if I'm a woman and I'm like, this sounds really good, and I know I need to go do this, but like, talk me through some of that. Like, what does that look like from career and progression and outcomes and not expecting it overnight?
Yeah, so I think first it starts, like you were saying, understanding the business needs, right? And I'm seeing this right now because I tell people, like, as you go up the career ladder, jobs are actually less publicly posted, right? Especially like director level and above roles, like that is, and even right now I'm seeing this for a lot of manager roles. Even it is about your network, right? And so networking with folks. And I actually have had 2 conversations literally this week alone with people who are looking for roles, and they said to me, oh, hey, somebody I know has the opportunity to potentially craft a role, or like they have headcount and they know they'd like to bring me in because we've worked together in the past. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Help them do that. What are your superpowers? Like you need to start by also understanding like what are your strengths? What do you bring to the table that differentiates you? And in those scenarios where you're in that job seeking situation, like how do your strengths tie into the challenges that that person is trying to solve to make it a no-brainer for their leadership to say, oh yeah, we should really bring that person in. So I think especially in the current market, there are a lot of opportunities to do that. And it starts, especially if you're not in a role already, with networking and really coming at it not from a place of like, I need a job, but networking and being like, what are the challenges that you're currently solving and highlighting how you can help there in your own unique way. And so I think then it also starts with like really understanding, and as women, we can downplay our superpowers, right? But really understanding what are your differentiators. And what I tell people is sometimes we struggle to see it ourselves. Ask peers, ask former managers that you worked well with, like people you trust, ask them, what would you describe as my superpower? Or what would you describe as the one thing you saw that I do really, really well? And you'll actually be surprised what might come up out of those conversations. And then let's say you're inside a company already. The other part is this isn't so often I see women and they think like, oh, I just need to work harder, right? I just need to work harder. And that's what's going to get me the promotion, the visibility, etc. And you're actually becoming the world's best kept secret for the company. And so it starts also by building relationships with peers, right? Building relationships with skip levels, understanding what is the what I call the unspoken org chart, right? So you have your official org chart of who reports to who and all of that. But in every company, there's also the unofficial one. And what I mean by that is who is the person that, for example, your CTO always listens to, right? Like, and you see, like, they're always listening to that person's ideas. Go build a relationship with them. Like, figure out, like, what is it that the CTO really cares about? Like, how have you been effective at sharing those insights and knowledge? And so it really, and I think sometimes we think, but like, I don't have the time for that. My job is to deliver. But if you want to get those promotions, if you want to craft those roles, you need to understand these other dynamics and understand that, especially as you go up the career ladder, your value is not just delivering more. Your value is impact through strategy.
Yes. Impact and outcomes. Like, what are the outcomes is the bottom line. Okay, we are coming up on my least favorite part of every single episode, but there's a two-part question that we always leave our listeners with. Okay, so the first part is, what legacy do you hope to leave as a woman leader in the tech industry? And if you could give just one piece of advice, what would it be?
Okay. Legacy is, I want more women to stay. And, you already said the quote, over 50% of women leave by the age of 35. And I want women to stop feeling invisible and get to a point where they feel like, I belong here and I'm not leaving, right? And that's not to say you can't decide you want to leave tech because you want to do something else. But I always say, I want people to be not forced out. Like, if they want to leave because, like, hey, they want to pursue something else amazing, like, go for it. But I don't want people to feel forced out. And so that is my legacy, is like, even if I can change just a few more people, like, making that impact. And it's also why I work with both men and women, because it's not just like, we need to just be building more inclusive cultures. And that's not just that. I can't do that by just working with women. And then the one piece of advice, and I give this to all the women that I talk to, which is, and this really ties to crafting your role, which is, stop waiting until you feel ready, because you're never going to feel 100% ready. And those who are going up the career ladder are doing so before they're 100% sure that you can do it. And I mean, there's always that statistic, like, men will apply to roles when they meet like 60% or less of the requirements, and women wait till 100%, right? And if you want to craft your role, you're never going to be 100% ready to do that. And, if somebody asks me, like, how did you get to the place that you did in your career? It's because I had a belief that I could figure it out. And I was willing to take the risks and do the things that maybe other people weren't willing to put themselves out there for. So it's okay. Like, the world is not going to end because somebody says no, or you don't do something perfectly.
It's always no if you didn't ask, if you didn't apply, if you didn't craft it, if you didn't find, Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So many nuggets. I'm sitting here. I always, at the end of every episode, have all these things floating in my mind of like, yes. So thank you so much for your time. I know it is hard to get time on schedules and craziness, but Jossie, thank you so much for being here with us today. There's so many insights that I'm just ready to like write down, you know what I mean? And like continuously use. So I hope each and every one of you as listeners also took away as much as I did from today's episode. And I want to see, and I want to hear who's going to get out there and really craft, find out what those problems are and get to crafting what's next for us. You do have the ability, you do have the power. You just need to believe in you. You are the thing standing in your way. Thank you to each and every one of you also for tuning in, for listening. Continue to like, subscribe, and continue following. We appreciate you guys. And until next time, see you later. You've been listening to the Women in Tech Trailblazers podcast. Thanks for being here. If something resonated with you, please share this episode with your friends, your colleagues, or anyone you know that needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to catch what's next. We'll be back soon with more real stories and honest conversations. Until then, keep showing up and let's keep making space at the table.